Hi folks! So to kick us off for activity number 6, I wanted to spend a little time with you looking back at activity number 5 and addressing some of the questions or loose ends that came out of that activity. I thought you all did a great job and you all got full credit for doing it. So what I'd like to do specifically is look at question number 1 and question number 7. Question number 1, if you recall, is this one right here, where I asked you to flip open your English Mercury book and to look at the table on pages 349 to 350. If you can't recall that table, go ahead and pause it right now. You can take a look back. And I asked you to think about what the rhetorical aim is for Essay 2. And remember, Essay 2 is a pair of letters that you're going to write to Julie, our hypothetical character, who is lying and cheating on her husband. And we want you to write 2 letters. One short letter telling us what it is that Kant would argue, kind of acting as though you were Kant making that argument. And then another short piece telling us what you think. And I know from reading some of your posts already that some of you think that what Julie's doing is morally sort of justifiable, and others of you think it's absolutely not. And so already you have arguments taking shape here. So I just wanted to clear up that for question number 1, the rhetorical aim that I was really hoping you would pick out was to persuade. And I understand that some of you may have not been drawn to that rhetorical aim because sometimes persuasion, it is associated with the word argumentation, which can feel combative or confrontational. And if you're not a combative or confrontational person, you might think, ooh, I don't want to do that. I'd rather share my feelings with Julie or express my ideas to Julie or explain to Julie. And even if you're doing it in such a way that feels more like sharing or explaining or expressing, your aim in the end is still persuasive, because my guess is that after you've told her what you're going to tell her, you probably don't want her to shrug her shoulders and go, well, that's nice. If you're really being effective in your words, you probably want her to go, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'm going to have to change my ways or continue doing what I'm doing with this new set of reasons in mind. So really, if you're thinking that she should change or that she should do what she's doing, but maybe do it for different reasons or slightly differently, then you really are acting to persuade as you write. So the letter itself may not feel combative. Persuasion is not necessarily always heavy-handed. Persuasion can be subtle. Persuasion can be very carefully finessed. Sometimes persuasive arguments don't even feel persuasive until we get to the last line of them. That's usually a case where the writer is withholding their thesis until the end. And so just keep in mind that whether you're writing from Kant's point of view or your point of view, you really are aiming to persuade in this essay. So I just wanted to clear that up. The other thing I wanted to talk with you about was question number 7, where I asked you to raise some questions, concerns, or confusions that you have, and you came up with some great things that really left me thinking. And so I want to address some of those here and hopefully give you some answers. The first comment says the length requirement is 1 to 1.5 pages each. Is that a typical Word document page at a specific font size? Word counts help me a little more so I can include all the requirements, but don't get too lengthy. Yeah, I mean, we didn't give you a word count on this one. And so I would generally say that 250 words is 1 page if it's Times New Roman and it's double spaced. And so if you want to think of this as like 350 words to maybe 4 or 450 words each section of the letter, that would be fine too. So if you were wondering about that, that would be my answer. Okay, the next question says, are we writing 2 separate essays since we're doing 2 separate letters? How do we stand on our side of it being morally wrong without offending the reader? Okay, these are 2 questions, so let me address them separately. Essentially, yes, they are 2 separate pieces. I don't want you to combine your point of view with Kant's. I'd like you to, you could even say something like letter to Julie, part 1, and then you can type that out for a page and a half, and then letter to Julie, part 2, and then Eric and I will know in the first part you're representing Kant, in the second part you're representing you. Don't try to blend these 2. That would be very confusing, I think, for both you and your reader. The second question, how do we stand on our side of it being morally wrong without offending the reader? That's a really interesting question. If you disagree with what Julie's doing when she flat out says in the end of the letter that she doesn't plan on changing, that's tricky. You have to think about, all right, how do I represent not just my points, but represent myself in a way that feels credible. This is where you have to start thinking about audience and saying, okay, I really am talking to a real person here, and I don't want to come off on my moral high horse and make her feel angry or defensive. And so these are questions of ethos, character, or credibility, and these are the kinds of things we're going to study when we get to the third unit. So I don't expect you to be masterful at this yet, but I do just hope that you'll keep in mind that, we're pretending Julie's a real person. Sometimes writers find it's helpful to concede a little bit before they make their argument. Maybe it would help to say something to Julie like, you're in a tough situation, Julie. And she is, really, if you think about it. If you show a little bit of a concession there, then maybe she'll be more willing to hear you if you say, even though it's a tough situation, here's why you still need to maintain honesty and loyalty with your husband. Maybe she won't feel like you're coming off as being rude or offensive and that kind of thing. So do your best with that, and we will study that more as we get further along in the course. Okay, so this next comment says, I'm concerned about how to keep it formal. I'll try the following stages, which I hope. Also with our own opinion letter, how do we keep it from sounding preachy and harsh if we disagree? I think that in part connects to the question I just addressed before. Again, things like qualifying your claim. This is something you can look up in your book if you want, or even just Google it. How do you qualify a claim? Or, how do you maybe concede a little bit so that you say, okay, Julie, I do understand this has got to be really hard for you, and yet here's why I think you and your husband will both be better served if you do things differently. So just think about your tone. Think about, how you're coming across to your reader. And I think if you have those questions in mind, it's not going to feel preachy. It's not going to feel harsh as some of you might be feeling at first. Yes, this person points out that God's view is so cut and dry, and for you it might be more of a struggle. So this is what I suggest. If you want to write down your claim. Yes, it's okay. No, it's not okay. And then you want to be able to articulate for yourself a couple of reasons. You might just have a gut feeling that it's either okay or not okay, but try to put words to that. If you say yes, it's okay, then maybe think about coming up with, think about coming up with two different reasons for why you think it's okay. And if you can't articulate reasons, then maybe you have to revisit whether or not you actually do think it's okay. So come up with a couple of reasons, just like Kant does. Your reasons may be different from his, even if you agree with his conclusion. But once you start putting your feelings down into actual articulated reasons, I think you're going to find it's easier to build an argument around that. Okay, a specific format that the essay needs to be written in. Well, you should go ahead and write it as a letter, Dear Julie. And you can label it before you actually write the letter. You might say something like Part 1 of Essay Number 2. Dear Julie, I am sorry for your difficult situation. However, and then you might go on from there. So actually write it as a letter. And that's interesting because letters tend to be more of open form writing. They're not closed form writing. They don't scream academic context. But as you write in that letter format, keep in mind that you're writing it for an audience of your instructors within an academic institution. And so you don't want to write really informally. You don't want to say, Dear Julie, you thoughtless, selfish jerk. That's simply not academic dialogue right there. That's not using academic awareness. And so even though we're using the format of a letter, you want to think about having language that's suitable for an academic audience, but yet still sounding casual enough to be in a letter. You want to think about actually having points that make sense, that use logic, that aren't just kind of, shoot from the hip kind of points. So it's a tricky thing to blend these two genres together, letter writing and academia. But, Eric and I realize that this is a challenge, and we're not going to, it's the first time we've assigned this essay ever before. So we're certainly going to take the mixing the genres with a grain of salt, and we want you to just try your hand at it and do your best. Okay, so this person says, my only concern is how am I going to word it so it's less of an essay and more of a paper. I think what this person might mean is more of a letter. And just follow the advice I think that I just gave for the last question, and that should be a good starting point. Okay, this next question says, I think my biggest point of concern at the time is being writing style of the letters. With the last few writing assignments, it was about objectively summarizing an author's work, whereas now we're going to be writing a letter from ours and Kant's perspective. So I guess I'm thinking how to make the letter sound letter-like and academic at the same time. Again, I think this falls into the realm of the stuff we were just talking about. If I didn't cover all of the concerns in this comment, whoever wrote it, please feel free to email me and I will address it further. Again, this person's concerned with mixing the personal letter with the academic, and I just want to reiterate that this is an interesting mix of genres, and again, Eric and I are going to be fair when we're grading it. We don't expect you to nail down these two genres perfectly. It's a hypothetical situation, so we'll be, absolutely fair with that. This person says they're still trying to understand Kant, especially when he says that we can only act according to a general rule that can be made into a universal law. I know Eric is working really hard right now and sending you all personalized feedback to try to help you make sense of Kant so that you can do a good job on this first letter. And so if you're feeling unclear about Kant by the middle of this week, definitely let Eric know and let me know, and we can help get you there if you need more help. Okay, this person says, I'm not sure how to initiate a letter in Kant's views. Kant's views are very complex. I've read it over and over again, and it's hard to grasp. Absolutely. The first time I read Kant, I really empathized with students. I thought this is pretty tough stuff. And so that's why Eric's spending extra time on it this week. That's why he's even changed our open discussion to just be about Kant and the categorical imperative. So hopefully the more we talk about this stuff, the more you'll start to grasp it. Okay, this person says, do I still get to see this activity so that I can remember what I picked? Absolutely. Sometimes the activities go away just because Eric and I only release them for a certain amount of time. If you ever want to see an activity that we've made we've made it invisible or we've hidden it, just email us and we can easily open those activities up again so that you can look back at what you wrote. And this person, I think this is the last question or concern, said they're worried about stretching their personal advice into 1.5 pages. They're not concerned about Kant because he has a lot of information, especially with both formulations, but this person's worried about how do I actually write a 1.5 pages of advice to Julie. And I think once you sit down and start doing it, do a really rough draft where you don't even censor yourself. You just allow the ideas to kind of flow out of you. And I think you'll be really surprised at how much material you can generate. I think it's scary before we actually sit down and start typing and doing the work. But once you sit down and start putting your ideas on paper, you can see how you can start building those ideas. Again, actually try to see if you can type out your claim and see if you can provide some concrete reasons beneath it. Furthermore, I think the activity that we're doing here, activity 6, the next few prompts, are going to help push your thinking even further so that you can have more material to include in that personal piece where you're advising Julie in the essay. So that's it. I think I've addressed everybody's questions and concerns that came up in activity number 5. If you still have questions or concerns, please do email me and I'll try to help you the best I can. Thanks.